Hi, I'm Gretchen Hirsch. I'm a sewing blogger and author. I also design fabric and sewing patterns. Today I'm going to talk about border print fabric and how to use it. So first of all, what is a border print? A border print, like you can see on all these dresses, is a fabric that utilizes a print that runs straight along the border of the fabric or the selvage of the fabric. So it looks like this when it comes off the bolt. I love border prints because they were really popular in the 40s and 50s, and that's the era I'm constantly inspired by. And I've seen some wonderful dresses and skirts from that era that have really whimsical border prints, like hat boxes and makeup and these Arabian Night themes and beautiful cityscapes, and they got really crazy and very whimsical. And then for some reason, they kind of fell out of fashion. But they're coming back now, and you're seeing more border prints showing up in fabric stores, which I think is a wonderful thing, and I was really excited to start designing some myself. The thing is, people don't always know how to sew with them or how best to utilize them. They offer a lot of really interesting design opportunities. So let's talk today about how you can get the most out of a border print when you're sewing. Here's what a border print is going to look like when it comes off the bolt. So let's look at this beach-themed one. As you can see, we have polka dots, sort of just like an all-over scattered dot throughout the center of the fabric. On one selvage, you have a small border of just these beach umbrellas. On the other selvage, you have a large border of this sort of extravagant beach scene of ladies sunbathing and playing in the water. So this is actually a double border because you have the small border and the large border, which is great. You might look at it and feel a little bit intimidated and say, okay, now I have two things to think about what to do with, but it actually gives you two design opportunities as well. So I'm going to talk about how some of these dresses utilize a double border print. Let's look at this first one on the side here. On the left side, this gray polka dot with the roses. Now the thing about border prints, as you might have guessed so far, is that to really utilize the border print, you need to use the selvage in a straight way so that it runs straight across a pattern piece. But a lot of pattern pieces are curved. So think about a circle skirt. That's a really wide curve you have at the bottom of the skirt. A border print is not going to work well for that. So that's why you often see border prints on what's called a dirndl skirt or a dirndl type skirt, which is just a rectangle that gets gathered into the waist, like a lot of these have. That's a really great design, really simple design for your first border print. Maybe just make a dirndl style skirt. The other thing you can do, if you want to have a straight edge to utilize the border print with, is use a pencil skirt. Super simple. Women love pencil skirts. Lots of women look great in them. So just use that border print along the straight edge, like in that gray dress over there. So these are great ways to use it. But how are you going to use that smaller double border? Now, in the first two dresses on the left over here, I have a smaller straight edge to use the small border on. On the gray dress on the left, which I designed this pattern specifically so that I could use that small border print. So it has a straight piece that runs right along the bust line, right here. So I could really make the most of a small border print here. The same thing with the blue beach print. I wanted to use that small umbrella print in a really attractive way, and it looks great in a one-shouldered design, which is also kind of summery and beachy, so it plays in with the print. And I designed this fabric to work on the bias, as you can see in this design. So it goes straight across the chest like this and ends in a one-shoulder design. And then it also has an added bow that's made up of a strip of that small border print. So it really makes the most of the small border, and then obviously the dirndl style skirt, you really see the beautiful beach border down there. Okay, but what if you don't have a smaller straight edge that you want to use that small border print along? That is perfectly fine because there's often a way for you to use the larger border twice. So let's look at this gray dress in the middle. It has, like we talked about, the pencil skirt. So we see the large, beautiful, luscious red and pink roses down there. And then this pattern has a midriff here. That's what this piece is called. So the rose border has been used twice in the midriff and on the skirt. And then there's a surprise in the back. This pattern I designed to have a fold back feature on the back. And there is one pink rose featured on each side of the fold back, which is a really cute look. So this is a really clever way to use it. When you're looking at patterns and dress designs, think about how you can maybe add in a fun little surprise like that with your print. Now, if you look at this corset-inspired pattern here, has the lacing up the center. It has the dirndl style skirt, so you really get to see a lot of the beautiful rose print here. I could not use that small rose border across the bust because this piece is really curved, okay? So I thought about how I wanted to utilize the roses again, and I decided to just reuse that bigger border. So we see it twice, and then we see the yellow polka dots in the middle, which is actually a really lovely way to balance the design on the top and bottom. Now the last dress on the end is a little different. As you can see, it's a little fancier than the others, not a day dress. This is an evening gown that I designed, and this is not a border print, but it is what is called a scalloped edge design. Scalloped edge designs can be lace. Very often they will have a scallop on one edge or both. In this case, this is an embroidered organza, which has a scallop on both edges. So let's take a look at some pattern pieces that you might be cutting out and think about how to utilize them. I have brought some paper pattern pieces for that corset-inspired dress right there to the right in the yellow rose print. And I'm going to talk a little bit how I decided to use the skirt pieces and also the bodice. So we were talking about dirndl style skirts and how they're rectangular. They really are. They could not be more simple. This is the pattern piece for the skirt front. As you can see, it's a rectangle. It has a cut on fold mark over here. So you would just cut this on the fold, you would open it out to get a big rectangle, and then you would gather it along the top. This is pretty easy, I hope, for you to see how you would use this. You really want to use as much of the roses as possible here. So you're just going to place this close to the bottom, and there's a lot of leafy greens at the bottom there that you can use for your hem. And then you're going to have your polka dots at the top. The challenge with this dress, at least for me, was figuring out what to do with that gathered bust inset, because the piece looks like this. I first thought about using the small border across the bust. And I started placing it. And this is what you have to do with border prints. You kind of have to use your imagination and look at the pattern pieces, look at the fabric. I put this over here and I realized that if I used the small border across the bust, it was just going to fall off right into the armpit and not create an intriguing design at all. So what I did was I decided to reuse the large border. And I realized it would look really beautiful if I kind of placed one of these pretty roses on each shoulder like that. So I kind of aimed to have one of these roses centered in the middle of each shoulder, and then kind of had it fade off into the polka dots at the top. So that was how I decided to do that design, but you could have just as easily used the center for your bodice inset. So maybe I just want to do the roses on the skirt, I only want to have polka dots across the bust line, and that's fine too. It's your dress, it's your design. Now, the other thing to think about with border prints is if you decide to only utilize certain parts of the fabric, you might end up with some weird little pieces that look a little bit like this. The thing is, I tend to collect these and think about what to do with them, and they are the perfect size and proportion to make doll clothes with. If you sew for a little girl, these are great for little girl skirts to just gather up one side of them, make a beautiful little skirt. This is also how you would do a gathered bust inset if you were just to cut along each side of this. So let's just cut along each side here. The great thing about polka dots is you can use them as a gauge to cut a straight sort of line. All right, so let's take this to the machine and just see how this looks gathered up. What I would do is do a long line of gathering stitches along each side. So change your stitch length to 5. And on each side of the roses, what you would do is 2 rows of gathering stitches along each side. But I'm just going to do one quick row here so you can get a sense of what this is going to look like gathered up. All right, now if I pull that bobbin thread there, it's going to start gathering. And you can see how this is going to gather into a beautiful little inset, especially when both sides are gathered. And again, how you could use this to make smaller clothes, doll clothes, little girls' dresses. So that's a lot about how to use border prints, how to utilize a double border print. In one design, you can use both sides of the border, or you can just take advantage of one side and use it in a little skirt like this or a whole dress. So I hope you are really inspired to go out and sew with border prints now.